Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Are You Ready for Scale in the 5G World? My name is Edward Chamberlain. I am the Content Marketing Manager at CloudSense. This is the first in our CloudSense Insight series of webinars, in which we'll be discussing upcoming trends, interviewing industry insiders, and conducting product overviews and demonstrations. These webinars will be, between half an hour long, short and sweet, to more long form webinars. But in today's, we'll be looking at the impact the 5G world will have on the B2B and enterprise telecommunications space, particularly as it pertains to SIM card activations and change management. So before I hand over to our speakers, I just encourage you to post any questions you have during the webinar into the Q&A function, which you should see at the bottom of your screen. And we'll get to as many questions as we can in the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. For any questions that we don't manage to answer during the broadcast, we'll try to follow up with them in email afterwards. But with that, I will introduce our speakers. Our speakers for today are Vish Kumar and Shri Krishan. Vish is the Global Telecommunications Lead at CloudSense, and he's previously worked for Telstra and Optus, building up decades of experience in the telco space, including with VNOs, wholesale, SMBs, B2B, and B2C spaces. Shri is the industry principal consultant at Infosys and has built up 23 years of experience working with telecom service providers, working on multiple large-scale digital transformations, new product launches, and cost optimization programs for telcos all across the B2B, B2C, and wholesale spaces. With that, I'm now going to hand over to Vish and Shri to take you through the webinar.
Thanks, Ed, and thank you everyone for taking your time to join us today to talk about scale. So as we jump into setting the scene about scale, what we're going to talk through today is what are the key things impacting your architecture, some considerations around your order manager, and what are some of the things you need to be aware of and understanding what scale and how it's impacting you today. We'll also look at the service assurance and other parts of your systems and your services within your own architecture. This isn't only restricted to B2B, it does impact B2C as well. Primarily, we will focus on the B2B use cases, but I will reference some of the B2C impacts that we need to look at as well. So today, when we talk about scale, we talk about the number of orders that we can process at any given time and how we manage them in changes, in service updates, rate plan changes, which is common in the mobile space. When we see large orders come through, we see telcos struggle when it comes down to processing these orders and turn to human glue to make sure that we can actually solve these problems. Now, these processes, customers have now been accustomed to seeing these orders take days, weeks, and sometimes months. This has a knock-on effect to the actual customer experience and also to your business operations. Not only can the customer start using your network or start using your goods and services quickly, they have to wait for it. But as an operational side of things, you've got to consider now that customer's expecting that rate plan day one. So your team now has to re-rate bills. They have to apply credits. They have to balance things out back and forth. And on top of that, any changes require any manual lookups. And your whole sales ops team is now reviewing what needs to be done to make sure that this customer has the best experience possible. Any changes in that period whilst you're activating them or making that change generally can't be done unless you do have a sophisticated system that can handle these large orders. So in summary, we need to look at your order management to make sure it can handle scale. But then also, how do we give the customers the best experience possible from your actual ordering journey, whether it's online or through a native channel? Now, does this change when we get into 5G? It does a little bit, but let's have a look at what it does in 5G. So as we go into 5G, we face the same problems. we're going to see very large orders come through. They just get bigger. We start seeing that the 5G ecosystem grows substantially, and we're connecting to more things in the B2B world, but then also in the B2C world. So where the average user in the B2C may have 5 to 6 devices, they may grow to 20 as an individual because they're actually connected to more things in their house, at work, and just around them. In the B2B space, we start seeing this get even more complex because now we're relying on a full ecosystem, which involves security, it involves monitoring and data, and could also involve policy changes and protocols. And to make things work all together, the end thing could be an application that holds everything together and ensuring the customer sees and feels the best experience possible. Now, looking at this becomes a big challenge for customers and also for carriers to maintain and manage all of these changes. So let's have a look at what are some of the key things that we need to look at to keep all of this really simple. So when we look at things, we understand there are lots of things that make 5G work. One of the key things to make 5G work really well is simplifying everything possible. And the reason why we say you need to simplify as many things as possible is because 5G is going to introduce changes significantly quicker than we've seen before. But it also means that there's going to be very, very large volumes coming through at quite frequently. So as opposed to doing an upgrade every year for that large customer, that would be a one-off event. And as a telco, you'd prepare for that. Very rarely will you see the whole customer of tens of thousands of services add an add-on at once. Today in the 5G world, we will see changes daily, and they will come in very, very large volumes. What we will need to do now is think about, what does our commercial products look like? We'll need to simplify them down to individual components and make them very, very easy to swap in and out. This will allow us to create versions quickly. It'll allow us to reuse that commercial product across multiple offers, but then also allow a customer to define their own journey. One of the key things with 5G and the ecosystem, especially in the B2B world, is we want to group all of these together. We want the customer to create their own solutions and be able to process them in their own time, whenever they want and how often they want. The other part of this is to automate as much of this as possible. The buying journey now has set a demand to say that customers want things here and now, and they want things quickly. And that is also in the same instance when they're working with one of your sales reps. So working with your sales reps, they want to know what works with what, but they also want to know how quickly can I have those 10,000 devices, to go into my water meters for my water company. I need customers and I want to give them the data so they can see how much usage they're using. And I also need it to work with my software. All of these demands we've heard before, but have always treated them as projects. Tomorrow, we're going to see this as a standard offering. We're going to see customers demand this and be able to change carriers and change devices seamlessly and quickly. As a telco, we need to be prepared for that, and we also need to be prepared for these mass changes quickly and easily. The other key things we also need to look at is, how do we become nimble to these different verticals? So if we take the automotive industry, and we've seen some really cool stuff in the market with the automotive industry, and as EVs start taking off globally, we're starting to see a whole new world of connectivity to cars, where I can summon my car from a parking lot. No one takes time to think about what is that connectivity journey and what are those things that's going on in the background to make sure that car comes to me. In the healthcare industry, we're seeing the healthcare industry get put under a lot of pressure over the last 2 years with COVID. Now we're actually seeing how we can service people at home. How can they recover at home without needing to come to the hospital should they need to travel very far or they're not well? We're seeing the healthcare tablets go to market quite frequently now, where we're seeing heart patients being monitored from a tablet at home and their doctors, cardiologists, and surgeons are seeing everything in real time and monitoring how they're actually recovering. In the manufacturing industry, we're starting to see this whole ecosystem shape to demand, so they can actually flex their business up and down based on what the demand is coming through the market. They're looking at things in terms of just in time. They're looking at their monitoring their data and their cameras to make sure everything is working swimmingly, and they're optimizing their workforce as much as possible. So we've gone through a lot about what is 4G, 5G, and some of the key impacts that we need to look at to simplify our whole ecosystem within the ordering journey, and making sure we can handle scale and give the customers the best experience. I'm going to hand to Shri to take us through some of the architectural considerations we need to look at, especially with our CPQ and order manager. Shri, can you take us through that?
Yeah, thank you, Vish, and thanks for setting the scene and providing the good insights into what 5G brings in. And what I would say that 5G is not just about the high speed or high capacity or low latency. It actually opens up a big opportunity for telcos to innovate and tap into a new set of customers and address a new revenue streams. So 5G capabilities creates wealth of opportunities for CSPs to go beyond connectivity, think beyond their connectivity business, and start monetizing the new digital services in the collaboration with different industry vertical partners, right? And by doing that, what happens that the ecosystem for the CSPs, which is mostly a self-driven ecosystem, actually expands significantly. It needs to include complete value chain of partner ecosystem into their space. And what does that mean? That the things like managing the contractual agreements, pricing setups, invoices, settlements across the life cycle or life value chain needs to be taken care of, right? But for all this to happen, the BSS and the OSS ecosystems needs to evolve to fit into 5G economy, manage the customer expectations, which is increasing very on demand basis and very real time, and manage broad range of stakeholders, right? So in nutshell, the BSS and the OSS to address and realize the full potential of 5G must be transformed to leverage the real power of it and monetize it significantly. It will need both functional and non-functional space changes, right? Let us look at, talk about some of the architectural changes which we should look at to leverage this power. So first thing, what we need to really telcos need to start thinking about, how do they make their BSS and OSS compliant for the partner ecosystem, using which they can collaborate with their partners, they can create new digital services, they can onboard new products and services from their partners. And to be able to do that, they have to really start thinking about how flexible, how open is their architecture, how easily it can integrate with third-party systems, and how seamlessly and what is the response time of those interfaces. Open API is one of the way to look at that standard interfaces, and really look at how they can make their entire BSS OSS more like a modular component and easily integratable architecture, which enables them to really start working with the partner ecosystem. Eventually, it will also need that they have to build all the capabilities which can be supported in the partner ecosystems. With the 5G coming in, as Vish also talked about, the user experience, the user expectations are changing. Everything should be on demand. Everything should be provided in a real time, right? And that leads to the huge set of, a change request, huge set of, new services being subscribed by the users, which eventually matters for telco because it results into new revenue, right? And our systems needs to really gear up to support that kind of a volume of orders, to support that kind of change request. And if some of the telcos have today manual ways to handle the orders, even for B2B or for B2C. That something needs to change. We have to really look at how we can do an automation of order management, subscription management, and make it more a template driven, where most of the provisioning exercise or changing to the service should be using the predefined templates with the minimal configuration changes. And in the real time, customers are looking for new services to be subscribed, unsubscribed, on demand, and everything really becomes event driven, right? So all our architecture should really be supporting the events, and we should really look at how the entire value chain can be supported using the real time propagation of the events, right? Talk about a customer subscribe to a service for 1 hour, but you have to really make sure that how you can create that into a chargeable event, how you can bill to the customer for that 1 hour itself, right? Talk about a customer really wants a service going on, but it goes down for a moment, right? It creates an event, and how your architecture is able to support that event for self-healing of that problem statement. So entire IT architecture should be really looked at how it can be made an event-driven architecture throughout the value chain for to meet the customer expectations and a customer experience, which is the need of the hour, right? Customer subscriptions, number of services, number of devices are increasing significantly. And to provide the services in the 5G world, you would be required to provision multiple touch points, multiple device activations, and all that has to be thought through more like a predefined template from the telco perspective, where you just push the template based on the customer request and things should happen instantly. So you can't wait for days or even for hours these days to provide the customer services. So you have to really think about how do you automatically handle the customer subscription management. And that's where the power of your revenue also lies, right? Quickly you can provision a service, quickly you can start making the revenue out of it. Another element with the 5G, the customers really want a control in their hand, how they can use the services, how they can manage their services, how they can configure their services. That also helps telcos to keep their operations cost low. So there has to be real focus on providing the self-serve capabilities to the end users and to the enterprise customers, so they can manage their own network slices, they can manage their own 5G services, they can do whatever they want, but the telco systems should be geared up to capture those events again, right? The changes which a user is doing, how are you able to convert them into revenue for yourself, money for yourself? So though again, it leads to us that everything has to become an event driven. Next element, we should really think about the network capabilities of communication service providers, how you can expose them as a service so that they can be easily bundled with other industry verticals, and you can combine them, provide them a new service offering in a bundled way. And that's where the power of monetization would also happen. Last but not the least, I would say if a telco is thinking beyond connectivity, they will be selling the non-telecom services along with their telco services. They have to really start thinking about how they can charge, how they can bill to the customer the non-telco services using their estate. And slowly and slowly they have to also start thinking about all their OSS and BSS capabilities, how they can be made available as a service in the bigger scheme of things. And that could also become another way to monetize, because their partners can end up using their functional capabilities as a service and pay to the telecom service providers. Next slide, please. Now, while these changes are happening, and these are utmost importance for a communication service provider, because this enables you to really make a positive impact on your revenues. If you are able to provision the customer services, we are able to react in a real time, right, to the customer request. That is where you will be able to make more revenues from those actions. If you are not able to, if there is a delay happening in the customer services subscriptions, if there's a delay happening in provisioning customer services, if the delay happening in not capturing the events, right, effectively you will be making an impact on your revenues in a negative way. So it's very important for communication service providers to make a positive impact on your revenues, to adapt to some of these architectural changes so that they can really start making more money out of it. Vish, if you want to add something to this, please.
Thanks, Shri. So from the business lens side of things, most telcos are investing a significant amount within the network to be ready for 5G. 5G opens a great wealth of opportunities, but the key differences in terms of where we're going to see changes for the B2B customers and what's really going to shift them to move carriers and actually take up some of these services is going to be how and what enables their end customers. Those key experiences will filter around in terms of what are the self-service things that we can, that Shri's just taken us through in terms of what services can I expose, but then how quickly and how many of them can I do in a very quick and succinct fashion. Customers, especially in key verticals, healthcare, automotive, and manufacturing, are going to be expecting these changes to be done quickly. As a telco, we can actually monetize these, provide new levels of service level assurances, but then also provide key data and analytics to these verticals to show how they're performing across all their different parts of their business. So let's jump into some of the key takeaways that we've gone through today. So today we've covered a whole load of different things, and we've gone through in terms of focusing on where we are today in terms of 4G and some of our key services we have there. We've gone through around the 5G and what some of the landscape changes in terms of how we actually going to handle some of these very large orders and changes coming through. Shri's taken us through some of the architecture pieces that we need to be aware of. But let's go through some of the key things that we really want you to go home with today. So address the customer demands today and now. So as you're preparing and spending a lot of money within your network and monetization for 5G, let's start looking at the customer experience today, simplifying some of the commercial products to make them reusable, introduce automation within your CPQ and ordering journeys, review your order management in terms of how do we simplify and enable it to scale to handle those extremely large orders. But then also, how is it talking to the other parts of your architecture? Can it work with your service system when an event comes through to make mass changes and allow customers to move without even having to place an order with you? Then we come into, let's have a look at our new revenue streams. So in the BSS and OSS space, we talk about the partner ecosystem. There is a plethora of partners that are now forming all of these ecosystem players to ensure that we're providing new experiences and solutions to the verticals and customers in the market today. Working with marketplaces and also with these key partners will enable telcos to ensure that they can be a key player for key verticals, whether it's healthcare, automotive, or even manufacturing. But it's extremely important that we focus on this and keep it simple as we go through it. Shri, do you want to take us through some of the processes that we need to look at as well?
Yeah, sure. So from the architecture perspective, the key takeaway I would say here is really consider making your architecture as an open integration architecture, standardized interfaces for ease of integration with third party within your systems or outside your systems. Look at how you can make more and more componentization of your services and expose everything, if possible, as a service within the constraints, right? That's where the power of 5G can be leveraged. Now I hand it over to Ed for any question answers.
All right. So thank you very much, Vish and Shri, for such a thorough and comprehensive presentation. We have about 5 minutes to go, so I'll take you through some of the questions that have come through in the meantime. So first question here, and I think this is probably for Shri. We are still setting up our network services for 5G. Are there some things we can do to ensure scale isn't an issue in advance?
Yeah, sure. Why with 5G, there is a massive increase in number of devices and orders and a lot of things which we talked about to handle, the scale. One thing which we should really think about is how we can make it more and more cloud native. Right, we can leverage the power of cloud scalability, leverage the computing power of cloud. Number two, how do we easily onboard uh, the open integration so that the orchestration to handle the entire partner ecosystem and new services is very crucial. And number three, I would say here is the automation in the entire life cycle, provisioning, monitoring, and monetization, right? Where you end up charging everything based on an event.
Okay, thank you, Shri. Anything to add to that, Vish?
No, the only thing I would add to that is, as you're preparing your network now for 5G, have a look at what your current side of 4G is. Have a look at what are your challenges you're facing within your ordering side of things. Because you've got a shiny new network coming in doesn't mean we take away from the customer experience. So have a look at the orchestration end to end, but then also how do we incorporate some of those modeling side of things we've gone through in terms of simplification and modularization as well.
Okay, great. Another question's come in. What is the most critical factor for forecasting the 5G network rollout since 4G is still maturing in most markets?
I'll take this one first, I guess, and then Shri, you can add to it. So the critical factor in forecasting your 5G is it's market dependent. What are the problems you're looking to solve? So in the B2B space, some of the carriers that we work with are looking to solve key vertical challenges. So one particular carrier is looking at healthcare in great detail in terms of how do they provide services to regional areas. Whilst I agree the 4G rollout is still maturing in a lot of markets, there is a significant demand as well in terms of what does 5G provide to the B2C world. In the B2C world where broadband isn't available, some carriers are looking to fill that void with 5G and provide very fast internet services to buildings as well as key remote areas where we can't get to. Shri, anything to add on that?
Yeah, in addition to that, there are conversations where carriers are looking at even to see whether the entire access side where people are talking, rolling out massive fibers, can that all be enabled using 5G? And that's where, 5G could make entire access wireless, right? So people don't have to even think about rolling out a massive infrastructure of fibers.
Okay, so we're approaching the top of the half hour. I think we probably have time for one last question before we wrap up. So this is a question about legacy systems. So how do we enable our architecture to move at the speed and agility needed when we're dealing with a lot of old legacy systems?
Yeah, so while telcos today have a legacy systems, they have to really, and some of the telcos are already doing that. They are adopting more SaaS-based, cloud-based solutions. They are making more and more solutions which are more capability-based solutions. And then, when they standardize their functions, their capabilities, and then they eventually have to migrate over to the new standards, right? Or new capabilities, where they today might have multiple systems doing the same thing on the legacy world. But once they create a new standardized capability, they have to possibly shut down everything on the legacy side and move over. Vish, anything you want to add to this, please?
On the legacy side of things, it's a case of looking at what you have today and probably working with your CPQ and order management provider in terms of how it balances both. there will always be a change in terms of how do we actually tackle both at the same time, because you're never going to be able to shut down one and look at the other. One of the key things, especially within your order manager, is how do you provision to both in the short term as you start migrating customers over, ensuring that it's not seen for the customer. So especially on the experience side of things within your CPQ and order manager, ensuring that you can hide the need to call out a legacy platform. It should just be the one experience as we start migrating over. In terms of the agile side of things, plan it correctly in terms of your demand, review the data in terms of where are the bulk of your customers, and plan your delivery accordingly for that.
Okay, thank you. So we've hit the half hour, so I'll just wrap up. I just want to say thank you once again to Vish and Shri for being such great speakers on this, and thank you everyone for participating. As I said at the beginning, this is the first of our CloudSense Insights webinars. We'll be running many more in the months to come. So, stay tuned. Visit us on cloudsense.com. You will also be, receiving an email with the survey asking a few questions about how you enjoyed this webinar. So we look forward to hearing your feedback about that. And just want to wish you all a goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.